Bernice Summerfield returns for a brand new series of audio drama adventures on Big Finish, as today I'm going to be taking a look at the new adventures of Bernice Summerfield Volume 5, entitled Buried Memories, starring Lisa Bowerman as the one and only Bernice Summerfield, alongside the one and only Unbound Doctor, as portrayed by David Warner. And it is of course about time too. The last time that we had a box set full of adventures with Bernice and the Unbound Doctor was back in 2017, and of course in 2018 it was the 20th anniversary of Bernice Summerfield, where we've seen the regular releases replaced with the Stories So Far series to kind of celebrate the different eras within Benny's very long tenure in Doctor Who history. So naturally it is very exciting to finally be able to catch up with Benny and the Unbound Doctor once more and follow the events after the New Adventures Volume 4. The physical box set is £22.99 and the download is £19.99, and naturally on the Big Finish website there is also the story details, casting information and technical details. However, before we get into the actual release itself, for those of you that have been watching this channel for the past few weeks, you will of course notice that the channel has gone under a little bit of a rebrand. Therefore I would just like to thank the brilliant Dave Burgess for creating the brand new title sequence and logo. Will of course be getting used on every single video from now on. Dave Burgess did also create the previous intro that has been used since 2015. I do believe probably appeared in over 200 videos on this channel. Therefore it is really lovely to have that redesign, and something of which that I feel has been needed for quite a while, as that intro has been used for a number of years, and essentially the channel and me personally has changed since the intro was first introduced back in 2015. So it is nice to have a new introduction, a start to a brand new era, Doctor Who reviews coming over the next few years. It's the beginning of a brand new chapter for the Host Productions, and of course change is always exciting. Additionally, before I actually get onto my review of the New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield Volume 5, if you haven't seen my reviews of Volume 3 or Volume 4, or listened to those releases and you intend to go onto those releases, in fact being spoiler free and have a spoiler free listening experience, I do not recommend watching this review, because I will be hinting some of the previous events within the previous box sets, and also I will be talking about the actual episodes within this release and talking about the different story details. Quite a lot of the story itself will still be left a mystery, however I will be talking about the general story premise and the characters overall. One of the rather exciting things about this box set is that all 4 stories are in fact written by writers who have never wrote for Big Finish before. Therefore I was expecting this set to have a lot of creativity and new ideas brought to the table. These new writers did in fact have mentors who were also Big Finish regulars, so the script editors for this box set are Simon Gurrier, Scott Handcock, Una McCormack and Guy Adams. Other additional credits: the director for this release is Scott Handcock, the music has been created by Steve Foxton, the producer is James Goss, the sound design has also been created by Steve Foxton, and as per usual the executive producers are Nicholas Briggs and Jason Haig-Ellery, with cover art as created by Tom Newson, who also did a wonderful job, and I absolutely love the colour palette on the cover art for this box set. So taking a look at this box set in general overview, the first episode is Pride of the Lampion, as written by Alison Leeds. The second episode is Clear History, as written by Doris V. Sutherland. Episode 3 is Dead and Breakfast, as written by April McCaffrey. And the final episode of the box set is Borrowed Time, as written by Lanny Woodward. Unlike some of the previous Bernice Summerfield box sets, this series is in fact completely standalone, so each individual story features brand new locations, brand new characters, and it doesn't really have a plot arc. However, it does have an interlocking theme, all of which, as the title of the box set suggests, relating to past and memories. But without further ado, let's take a look at the first story of the release, which is Pride of the Lampion, as written by Alison Leeds. This story does in fact have a rather big job, because for those of you that have listened to the previous New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield, the past 2 volumes have of course taken place within the Unbound universe, an area or a universe that takes place out of the normal Doctor Who canon, and the Unbound Doctor tethered his own TARDIS essentially to Bernice Summerfield due to her having travelled with our Doctor from our universe, and the end of the last volume seen the Unbound Doctor travel into our own universe, universe, and in this box set as well as the future box sets we are going to see how that exactly pans out, having two different incarnations of the Doctor within the same universe. And this box set is kind of seeing the Unbound Doctor explore our universe with Bernice Summerfield at the helm, almost giving the grand tour. And I think that Pride of the Lampion is a really lovely story to start off that theme. We see the Doctor and Bernice go to antiquities on Claren 5, and basically Bernice Summerfield is rather in awe at this unusual figurine that she finds at the car boot and wants to find out about it, wants to find out about its past and its history. And naturally the Doctor isn't too fussed by this, because he's a Doctor that is much different to the Doctor from our universe, as you would have encountered if you've listened to the previous box sets. He is a lot more independent and he is a lot more uptight with himself, and generally he is a Doctor that will say things how they are. He's kind of the Doctor that you would want around when you wish to have a reality check. He doesn't sugarcoat things, just says things how they are and cuts to the chase. And naturally this Doctor isn't necessarily as adventure focused as the Doctor from our universe, which is certainly presented very well throughout this story. In fact, David Warner, accompanied with Alison Leeds writing throughout this story, is a perfect combination. I think that Alison does a great job of capturing the character, also getting that great balance between the rather serious side but also the comedic side as well. There is a number of moments throughout this story where David Warner performs these absolutely excellent one-liners in a way that is so serious yet funny at the same time. I also absolutely love the way that Alison Leeds directly involved Bernice Summerfield's career and archaeologist background within the narrative of this story, and generally almost using that as a weakness for the character. We get to see Bernice actually doing a little bit of investigation into the history of this figurine and researching about it in this library, and naturally the Doctor sees that bad things are on the way and wishes to prove Bernice Summerfield wrong for her own safety. However, she kind of takes a little bit of offence to this and wishes to find out things for herself. A very unusual critique that I have for this story is that I kind of feel that the Lampion themselves, the alien of the piece, was a little bit underdeveloped and a bit like a cardboard cutout. However, I say it is a critique because at the same time it kind of works to the story's benefit, because when in context of the actual narrative it makes sense that the alien is a cardboard cutout, almost stereotype bad villain, and that sounds very unusual. Yet if you go and listen to this box set, you may understand what I'm talking about, or I may just be talking a load of crap. It's one of the two, but in my opinion it kind of makes sense that the alien was kind of two-dimensional due to what happens within the final act of this story. Also, David Warner as the Doctor in the final half is absolutely superb. Once again, a brilliant balance between seriousness and comedy. He just made me laugh. I think the scene within the end of this story is possibly one of the main highlights of this box set as a whole. It is very unusual for me to like episode 1 as much as I do. Normally it's one of the later stories that I like the most in a box set, but Pride of the Lampion kicks this set off to an absolute brilliant start. Episode 2 is Clear History, as written by Doris V. Sutherland. Now, if you are a fan of futuristic, this story is definitely for you, because we see this story tackling the idea of artificial intelligence, simulations, and generally the human relationship with technology. If you are a fan of Black Mirror, then this story will probably be up your street, because it has this whole idea of reality and what isn't reality, and the general response to technology. You have Bernice Summerfield, who is very open-minded to the idea of technology on different planets, and then you have the Unbound Doctor, which is once again a lot more reserved to the idea and generally believes things should be a bit more traditional. And I think that this story is amazing for its creativity once again, and I really do praise Doris's ideas. I think that she puts something into this story that is so excellently detailed and so excellently presented within a 1-hour story. You get generally the taste of Civitas G as a planet, the people who live on the planet, or at least live within the simulation, and how they live their life on a day-to-day basis, being within this almost perfect world, ruled over by somebody called the Administrator. Of course, soon after the Doctor and Benny arrive, we find out that Civitas G in fact has a little bit of a darker underlying history, which may have involved a few sacrifices in the past in order to give the technology that Civitas has to this day, currently. And we see the Doctor trying to uncover that mystery, whilst Benny kind of goes around and meets different people and generally is a lot more happy to accept this technology as a whole. And the one thing that I think is the main criticism of this story for me is that it throws so many ideas to the table, so many problems for the Doctor and Benny to face, that possibly at some points it may feel like it has bitten off more than it can chew. That Doris Sutherland has a way of writing that is incredibly fast-paced, but often sometimes a little bit too fast-paced. I think that certainly within the later half, I needed to kind of slow down a little bit and think, wait, what is going on here? And it is one of those stories that when you finish it, you kind of don't really know what to think of it. You need to go back and re-listen to it again because of the amount of ideas that it brings to the table. So it may have either been best for it to slow down a bit and have less ideas and develop the ones that it has, as opposed to bringing so many ideas to just a 1 hour story. So for those of you that are new to Big Finish, this story will be a little bit of a daunting one in my own opinion, simply because of how complex and fast-paced it is. Very unusually as well, this story does feel a bit more like a Doctor Who episode. It doesn't feel like a Bernice Summerfield story, and if anything, I kind of feel like the Doctor does take more of a prominent role over Benny, especially within the later half of this story. Very oddly, I felt like the Unbound Doctor was slipping into the role of a usual incarnation of the Doctor that you would expect, say, Peter Davison or Sylvester McCoy or any of the other Doctors from our universe to be like. However, the Unbound Doctor is different, and I feel like that is represented well within the early half. However, maybe some of that character is kind of lost within the later half of the story, and as I say, it might feel a bit more like just a regular Doctor Who episode, as opposed to a Doctor with different beliefs and ideas from another universe. Gavin Swift also performs absolutely excellently as the administrator. He is a young person almost with too much power. He is naive and he is the controller of his own microcosm of the universe. He's the puppeteer of the different people within this civilization, and he is somebody that has too much power and how that can generally affect somebody when they have too much power, and that is nicely explored throughout this episode, so a big credit to him for this story. And also I think that very unusually this story is one of those ones that works incredibly well on audio, because due to it being within a simulation, you can picture how it would look within your head. You can imagine the different characters popping up here and there. You can imagine these different things that they would see within the simulation, the screens popping up all over, very much like how you would see within Black Mirror. However, because it's in your imagination, you can do stuff that science fiction and CGI cannot do visually on TV. And I think that if this story was a visual episode, it will kind of attach a form of reality to it, which I think would be a negative as opposed to a positive. I like the fact that this is audio because it seems beyond the realms of possibility, especially when it comes to imagining this simulation of a whole world. I do quite like it for that. Episode 3, Dead and Breakfast, as written by Alice McCaffrey. Now before we even get on to the plot for this story, I would just like to credit Alice McCaffrey for her excellent writing of both the Unbound Doctor as well as Bernice Summerfield. There is an absolutely brilliant understanding of both of those characters and their personalities. I think that Bernice Summerfield especially is presented in a really accurate manner, and arguably one of the most well-written versions of Bernice that I have seen throughout the entirety of this box set. Especially for the Unbound Doctor as well. He is a bit more relaxed in this story, certainly a bit more less quirky than in the other episodes. Sees the Unbound Doctor and Bernice become a married couple, which at first thought sounds very unusual. How on earth could you put these two characters together within marriage? But the more that you think about it, they are two characters that love each other but hate each other, constantly quabble but constantly laugh, and they just love to hate, almost. And I think that when you put it down to it, they are pretty much a married couple, and I think that works so well within this story, and their characters almost sit dear and darling in a very funny way all the way through the story, almost through gritted teeth, and that makes for an extra level of comedy throughout this episode, which is just perfect. In this story, we are also introduced to a character called Flaw, as in fact performed by Jacqueline King, who does also play Sylvia Noble, of course the mother of Donna Noble within the new series. However, this time round she's playing a cyborg, I do believe a battle cyborg or something, or a former battle cyborg, who is now retired to what she calls a planet backwater, where she just wants to live out the rest of her life without being watched by anyone, essentially a quiet retirement almost. And the Doctor and Benny stumble into her life almost as a place for accommodation, a bed and breakfast, where they seek to live within this society for a while, where Benny decides to become a part of an archaeological dig once again, to dig up the remains of an old civilization run by a queen called Queen Zilla. And at that excavation, she does also become friends with a character called Rylan, who would become almost her companion throughout this story, along with a policewoman who becomes a companion to the Doctor, called Daphne. So very unusually in this story, we have a team going on an adventure with Benny and the Doctor. And I must say, I think that Alice does in fact write all of the characters very well, considering the rather large cast. It's probably one of the largest of the whole set, but I think that Alice balances each character very well and introduces them at the right points. Lisa Bowerman also has some excellent moments within the later half of this story, where she gets to perform a little bit differently to the usual Bernice that we know, and Lisa Bowerman does an excellent job once again. She's certainly one of the best actresses that Big Finish do employ, which naturally is expected for Bernice Summerfield, the longest running Doctor Who spin-off of all time. You would expect her to be a brilliant actress, and she definitely is, and it will be lovely to see her within the TV show one day, and quite frankly, it's a crime that she hasn't been in it yet. It's mental and it blows my mind every time I think about it. I think that my only flaw with Dead and Breakfast is the lack of world building. I kind of feel like the characters are brilliant throughout this story, however the actual location of this planet isn't as well written. I kind of feel like the characters make the story what it is, however they are almost living in a location that it is an unfinished planet. It doesn't really have too much backstory to it. Although we have the idea of Queen Zilla, I wanted to know more, because this planet has an archaic way of thinking about things, a rather traditional Old English view, where the women follow in the shadows of the males, and I think that that's perfect for Bernice Summerfield, because she is such a strong woman and she wouldn't like to be controlled by a man, obviously, and it would be nice to see that played with more, especially the world itself, because I felt like I didn't know it. I didn't know the planet that they were on. I can't quite recall what the name of the planet was on. It's the only story of this release where I can't in fact remember what the name of the planet is. I think that that says something, because the world itself didn't really have a personality. And now moving on to the fourth and final episode of the box set, which is Borrowed Time, as written by Lanny Woodward. This episode sees the Doctor and Benny on the journey for the Byrinthian Rail Network, which is once again another excavation, archaeological dig that the Doctor and Benny go on, and naturally the Doctor is a little bit bored by it. He doesn't see the point of being an archaeologist when you have a time machine at your disposal, which is very true, I suppose. However, Benny naturally wants to do it the correct way. And in this story, we see them going after a train network that basically disappeared 100 years ago, or more than 100 years ago, something like that, and it's underground. It's the equivalent of Doctor Who does the London Underground in space, where you have this brilliant idea of public transport being transformed into a science fiction alien that is so perfectly captured. It is absolutely brilliant the way that Lanny uses the announcements of an underground train, however makes it incredibly eerie and chilling, but also makes it the perfect plot point for a Doctor Who story. You will recall when I was taking a look at Dead and Breakfast, I was saying about the world building and how kind of the lack of it there was. In this story, it is the complete opposite. The Byrinthian Rail Network is one of the best explained expositional things that has been written within this box set. I understood what was going on, I understood the point of the rail network, I understood why it existed, and I even understood the geographical sense behind it, because we have this train that is like a London Underground train, however it physically builds and digs the tunnels as it is moving along. It's kind of like that thing from Wallace and Gromit, from in fact recalling from my childhood memories. It's very unusual, but it works very well, and I think that it was explained quite well throughout the story. It gave me good understanding of what the story was actually about, and it made complete sense, and because of that you went into the story having a good idea of the background and what was going on, and it made you feel a lot more involved. Essentially, when you strip the story down to its bare minimum, it is pretty much a three-hander, where you have the Doctor, Benny, and a character called Anita, which is played by two different actors, because we have two versions of her, a younger version and an older version. And that is basically to represent the amount of time the train has in fact been underground missing, and we have a younger version of the character growing up within this train, essentially having an automated voice machine as a friend. However, it's also a kind of living and breathing train at the same time that wants to take the safety of its passengers as #1 priority. However, it takes that to an extreme, and we have this girl essentially living her entire life missing underground, and that is really well represented throughout this story because it is so logical and so twisted how we get to see this story play out. However, it makes complete sense, and generally it makes the story quite grim yet also enjoyable. The way that Bernice interacts with the character called Anita is in a way that's almost a paranormal level. She feels like a ghost, yet she's real, but also at the same time you have the Doctor in there as well, who doesn't quite understand what's going on, and they both go off and do their own things within this story. However, they come together within the final act, I would probably say the final 20 to 25 minutes, and they work together as a really strong TARDIS team. They are around the same level as the 7th Doctor and Ace, the 3rd Doctor and Jo. Their bond is so strong and they work together so incredibly well, making it an absolute joy to listen to. And I think that if anything, although this series does not have a plot arc and doesn't really have any interlocking themes other than the idea of memories and past, this whole series does build on Benny and the Doctor's relationship and how strong their relationship is. And within this story and the previous one, we also get the idea of the Doctor being rather reliant on Benny, because originally he didn't particularly like her too much. I would dare say he even disliked her to an extent, and now they've kind of grew to be one another's friend and carer. And I think especially when you have this Doctor within an entirely new universe, Benny has become more important to the Doctor than a regular companion would to the Doctor in our universe. So again, on a very same level to that of Pride of the Lampion, I think that Lanny Woodward does a very good job of writing the David Warner Doctor. There is that excellent balance between seriousness and quirkiness and comedy at the same time, making David Warner an absolute joy to listen to, and he just continues to be one of my favourite incarnations of the Doctor, simply because of that balance and character. He's almost like Peter Capaldi's Doctor, but in a consistent manner, constantly being the same person, however altering in emotion ever so slightly depending on what scenario he is placed in a much more effective way than what the 12th Doctor was, because his personality would naturally change constantly all the time depending on who was writing him. However, with the David Warner Doctor, there is that sense of consistency. My favourite two stories of this box set are Pride of the Lampion and Borrowed Time, simply for the same reasons. Incredibly strong characters, incredibly strong world building, and a lot of fun to listen to. The other two stories being of course Clear History and Dead and Breakfast are also a lot of fun and do have some very individual and unique plot lines, but at the same time didn't quite grab my attention as much as the other two stories, being episode 1 and episode 4. So overall, for the New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield Volume 5 Buried Memories, a rather interesting box set. However, for me, I did feel at points it did lack in something. I think comparing it to the New Adventures Volume 3 and Volume 4, the beauty of the Unbound universe is the experimental nature of it and essentially the lack of a rulebook. They could do anything, and when going into this box set I was worried that they were going to take Benny and the Unbound Doctor so very close to just being traditional Doctor Who, and that is not what this Doctor is about. He's about being unique and individual and different, and I would say that this box set maybe does take a little bit of that magic away. It's not as unique anymore and it isn't as limitless as the previous two sets. I do hope that within the next box set, and hopefully the one after that, we start to see a return to that more experimental form of the Unbound Doctor, being a little bit more different in his personality and unique, but also brilliant, working alongside Lisa Bowerman. However, that is not to say that I do not like this release. It works well as a story of 4 individual adventures, and do have certainly 4 very individual and creative plot lines, and that is solely down to the brand new writers that have been brought on board. However, I think that next time it would be nice. I'm all for bringing on new writers. It's perfect to have new names for Big Finish's writing team, However, I think they should have maybe 2 new writers, as opposed to having a whole box set of new writers. Have, say, episode 1 and 3 written by new writers, and then episode 2 and 4 written by a Big Finish regular, and then have an overarching plot throughout that is script edited to make sure it's consistent, and then you have that right balance between a new writer and a traditional Finish regular to kind of oversee everything, making it feel more consistent, as opposed to having almost 4 separate individual stories. So thank you very much for watching this review. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have any questions about this box set, please do feel free to leave them in the comments section below, and I will of course reply to them at some point in the near future. And naturally stay tuned on The Host Productions for brand new content every single week, and new Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama reviews every single month. No doubt my next Big Finish Bernice Summerfield review will in fact be next year, when the next New Adventures box set will be released, probably around the same time in 2020. And of course on that note, I will see you all next time. Bye for now.